I'm Miss Redding. I teach 6th grade at Central, and I've picked out a really good book to share with you this week. It's called The Bunyans, and it's by Audrey Wood. I really like the author and how she uses words to tell this traditional tale. It is a tall tale, and so please listen in to figure out some things that sound kind of realistic, but some things that just seem kind of crazy. The main reason I like this book, though, is definitely the pictures. The pictures are by David Shannon, and he did an amazing job. So check out all the characters and how gorgeous the scenery is in this book.
Okay, this is The Bunyans by Audrey Wood, illustrated by David Shannon. And check out how cute those kids are. There's a little note at the beginning that tells us, Storyteller's Note. Now I suppose that you've heard about the mighty logger Paul Bunyan and his great ox named Babe, but in the early days of our country, Paul and Babe cleared the land for the settlers, so farms and cities could spring up. And you probably know that Paul was taller than a redwood tree, stronger than 50 grizzly bears, and smarter than a library full of books. But you may not know that Paul was married and had 2 fine children. Check out how tall he is. This is a huge tree, a redwood. He's a lot bigger, and there's his blue ox, Babe. One day, when Paul Bunyan was out clearing a road through the forests of Kentucky, a great pounding began to shake the earth. Looking around, Paul discovered an enormous hole in the side of a hill. The lumberjack pulled up an acre of dry cane and fashioned a torch to light his way. Paul climbed inside the hole and followed the sound underground for miles until he came to a large cavern glistening with crystals. By the flickering light of his torch, he saw a gigantic woman banging a behemoth pickaxe against a wall. It was love at first sight. He's peeking in there, and I think he's seeing his sweetheart. I'm Carrie McGinty, the gigantic woman said. I was sitting on the hill when my lucky wishbone fell down a crack into the earth. I've been digging all day trying to find it. With a grin on his face as wide as the Missouri River, Paul reached into his shirt pocket. I've got one too, he said, pulling out his lucky wishbone. Marry me, Carrie, and we'll share mine. Okay, it's kind of hard to tell, but she's taken up that entire cave. Massive pickaxe. She looks pretty strong. Well, Carrie agreed, and their wedding invitations were mailed out right away. The invitations were so large, only one needed to be sent to each state. Everybody could read them for miles. The invitation said, you are cordially invited to the mammoth weddings of Paul Bunyan and Carrie McGinty. The couple were married in the enormous crystal cavern that Carrie had carved, and after the ceremony, folks began to call it Mammoth Cave. The giantess had dug more than 200 miles, making it the longest cave in the world, so the name fit perfectly. I don't know if you noticed, but earlier they called him a giant. They called her a giantess because she's a woman. And down here they've got the preacher or the minister marrying them. That's a normal-sized guy. Oh my gosh. Look how happy he looks, and she does too. Oh, my favorite. Look at these kids. They're so cute. Okay, look at this kid. Okay, this is their son, and he's got a little toy wagon. I think it's a real-size wagon, but it's just like a toy to him. And he's got a little slingshot. Paul and Carrie settled down on a farm in Maine, and soon there were 2 new Bunyans. While Paul Bunyan traveled with his logging crew, Ma Bunyan worked the farm and cared for their jumbo boy named Little Jean. Isn't that a funny name, Little Jean? And their gigantic girl named Teeny. Well, she's not teeny at all. Look at that. It's like a giant cat. A wild cat, maybe. And look down there. There's a little tiny house there in the background. Well, one morning when Paul Bunyan was home between jobs, Ma Bunyan cooked up a hearty breakfast of pancakes and syrup. Oh, man, that sounds good. Teeny was wrestling with his big purple puma named Slink and accidentally dumped a silo of syrup on her head. And there's that word puma, P-U-M-A. That's sort of like a cougar or a mountain cat. Teeny's hair was so sweet, bears crawled into it and burrowed deep into her curls. Try as they might, Ma and Paul Bunyan couldn't wash them out. We'll need a forceful shower of water to get rid of those varmints, Ma Bunyan declared. Oh my gosh, they're checking out. Look at that. This one's just hanging there. Oh my word. Well, Paul Bunyan had an idea. He placed his daughter on Babe, remember that's the ox, and led them into the Niagara River in Canada. The gargantuan father scooped up a huge hole in the middle of the riverbed. As the great river roared down into the deep hole, Teeny cried out in delight, "Niagara Falls!" Okay, Teeny showered in the waterfall, and the pesky bears were washed downstream. I'm not sure if you're checking out down here, but down here you can see little bears kind of going down the stream. And I don't think they're really that tiny. They're just tiny compared to the other characters. Oh, we're getting pretty close to the end. When little Gene was 5, he wanted to work too, so he followed his pa out to his logging cabin in Montana. Thinking his son was too young to do much of anything, Paul set little Gene down in a barren canyon in Utah to play for the day. When the lumberjack went to fetch him, he couldn't believe his eyes. Little Gene had carved the canyon into a wonderland of fanciful shapes. Pa Bunyan got tongue-tied and said, "Oh, that's mighty Bryce Nanyan, coy. Oh, I didn't mean to say that. I mean a mighty nice canyon, boy." Somehow part of that mix-up stuck. To this day, that canyon is known as Bryce Canyon. Look, he's got a little sand shovel, like he's at the beach or something. After all that sculpting, little Gene's shoes were full of sand. Pa knew Ma Bunyan wouldn't want her clean floors dirtied up, so he told little Gene to sit down and empty out his shoes. The sand from little Gene's shoes blew away on the eastern wind and settled down and stayed away. It covered a valley 10 miles long, making sand dunes 800 feet high. Everyone knows that's how the great sand dunes of Colorado came to be. Oh, look how cute, walking off in the distance with his paw. Oh, I just love these kids. What in the world does she have underneath her feet? Huh. Are you guessing? Well, one summer, little Gene and Teeny wanted to go to the beach. Ma Bunyan told them to follow a river to the ocean, but all the rivers flowed west back then, so they missed the Atlantic Ocean and ended up on the other side of the country instead. Ma Bunyan tracked them out to the Pacific Ocean, where she found Teeny riding on the backs of 2 blue whales. Yep, those are whales. And little Gene was carving out 50 zigzag miles of the California coast. Kind of looks like he's in trouble or something, like, oops, I broke all that dirt. When Ma Bunyan saw what her son had done, she exclaimed, "What's the big idea, sir?" From that time on, the scenic area was known as Big Sur. Oh my goodness. Well, Ma Bunyan knew she had to put up a barrier to remind her children not to wander off so far. So on the way home, everyone pitched in and built the Rocky Mountains. Teeny gathered up and sorted out all the rivers, letting some flow east and others west. And after that, the children had no trouble following the eastern rivers down to the Atlantic Ocean. And when they wanted to go exploring, Ma Bunyan would call out, "Now don't cross that continental divide, children." My goodness, they're playing on the tops of mountains. That looks like fun. The best thing about camping is sleeping outdoors, and the worst thing is not having enough hot water. That's why the Bunyans always camped in Wyoming. By the time their camping years were over, Ma Bunyan had poked more than 300 holes in the ground with her pickaxe and released tons of hot water from geysers. But Ma got tired of poking so many holes, so she made a geyser that blew every hour on the hour. After that, there was a steady supply of hot water to keep the giant's clothes and dishes sparkling clean. Teeny named the geyser Old Faithful, and to this day, Old Faithful still blows its top every hour in the Yellowstone National Park. My goodness, that's creative. I never thought about that being a place to wash your dishes. That'd be a mess. Well, as our great country grew up, so did the Bunyan children. When the kids left home, Ma and Pa Bunyan retired to a wilderness area where they still live happily. My goodness, they're playing croquet with pickaxes? That's crazy. Oh, the little girl grew up. Teeny hitched a ride on the Whale over to England and became a famous fashion designer. Her colorful skirts made from hot air balloons and her breezy blouses cut from ship sails were a sensation at the first World's Fair in London. So that's made out of the sails there, or from the balloons. Interesting. And there's Gene. He grew up too. Little Gene traveled to Venice, Italy, where he studied astronomy and art. Every day, the gondoliers would take their passengers down the Grand Canal to watch the giant artist chiseling his marble sculptures. And the gondolier is the person that rows the boat, sort of like that. Okay, we only have just another couple pages. After graduation, little Gene decided to explore new lands, as his parents had done. So he took 2 great jumps and 1 flying leap and bounded up into outer space. In 1979, the year of our country's bicentennial, a spacecraft sent by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration was on a mission to study Mars. The spacecraft was named Viking 1. Okay, and it took many photographs of the surface of the planet. One mysterious photo looked like a face carved out of colossal rock. Some say the photograph is not a face, but an illusion caused by light and shadows on the rock. Others think the famous Martian face is just the spitting image of little Gene Bunyan. If that's so, who knows what he's up to on other planets? And then it just leaves you with one last little happy page. Only time will tell.
So I really hope you enjoyed the story, The Bunyans. If you enjoyed it, there's lots of different connections you can make. I know down in our library here at Central, and other libraries too, you'll find other books by Audrey Wood. You would look under W-O-O-D, Wood. And David Shannon, again, he has done amazing books. He's done quite a few. And if you were to do a search with Mrs. Sinful in the library, she could find a whole bunch of books by him. And just remember too, tall tales, if you like them, we can find other tall tales in the library too. A lot of times they tell you things, not just wacky things, but they explain things and how they happened in a very peculiar way. You could tell most of this wasn't true, but certain places you might say, hey, that sounded familiar to me. And so it's kind of a funny way of explaining how things happen in the world.